have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello, happy Monday, or I guess whenever you're listening to this, happy day. My name is Mandy Bryce, and I am the host of the Bold Moves podcast, and I am so glad that you are here to hear episode number 321. Today, I am sharing my interview with Ana Paula Munoz, who used to be a physical architect and in fact worked with a very famous one whose work I recognized and have admired for a long time, but is now what is called a spiritual architect and the creator of SoulShape, where she helps successful professionals design their lives the way that they want to. So I strongly recommend that you listen on for more information about Ana Paula and what wonderful things she has to offer and the bold moves that she's made. Without any further ado, here is my chat with Ana Paula. Hello, everyone. Today I am chatting with Ana Paula Munoz. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
My pleasure. I'm super excited to finally have you on. We've been kind of communicating back and forth for quite a while to make this happen, and here it is. You know the show is called Bold Moves, and you wouldn't be here if you hadn't made some. So I would love to hear your story and some of the risks that you've taken to get you to where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, to start off, I'm a spiritual architect, and it actually goes full circle. It started with being a physical architect. So I did all of architecture school. Anyone hearing this that knows about that, it's super intense.
Yeah.
And then I did my master's, got to my dream job. I was working for like a really famous architect that like I learned about in school, and it was like my dream job.
Amazing.
And then I realized it wasn't what was really in my heart, like the way that I wanted to connect and serve and be in the world. And so I started creating something different. And that's when I created SoulShape, and I created what I do now, which is spiritual architecture and supporting people to get a strong foundation for their spirituality and get very clear on their mindset and limiting beliefs and things that hold them back so they can actually create and design the life that they want.
That's cool. I love the title. It's super fun and creative. So if people are listening, since I'm guessing you're probably the only person in the world that calls themselves a spiritual architect. I don't know if you've Googled that and found like a career soulmate somewhere else in the world or anything, but what exactly does that mean? And what does like a day-to-day or week-to-week look like for you?
Yes, of course. So I don't know if there's others out there, but I know there's been people that are like, "Oh, I want to take that," and I'm like, "Okay." I mean, I'm a full circle architect, but so it's kind of funny. But yeah, I don't know. What I do day to day is basically it's I support people in designing their life and creating it. So from like the beginning phase, like you would in a building, you sketch it out and you see, okay, what works, what doesn't work, da, da, da. Same thing in life, right? It's what structures do you have in your life that are no longer serving you? What structures are holding you back from actually manifesting into your reality the kind of life that you want to be living? And that's like not just physical things manifesting, but everything, like your mindset, your way of being, the way that you feel in your life, the way that you interact with others. And it's a whole on perspective and reality that you get to step into as you design your life.
I think that's beautiful. And one thing I love about it is there's plenty of people who call themselves life coaches. And I think especially recently that has grown quite a bit, which is great because I think everyone should have some sort of guidance, an outside perspective to kind of maybe point things out that we aren't noticing ourselves. But I feel like because you had already manifested your dream job as an architect, you've kind of proven yourself that like, okay, I've shown you that I know how to do this, and you've stayed true to it because when it didn't fulfill you the way it wanted, you gave it up, your dream job, to go for what would truly be your soul's dream job. So I just think that's really cool and want to applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. So of course you mentioned like the process and looking at the structures and sketching out what you want, that makes me wonder if you know your purpose, because I think that's a big question that's hard for a lot of people. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd just love to hear your response to that, because, maybe you don't believe in a purpose, or I don't know, but I always
Yeah.
like to ask people what they think about that.
Of course. No, and that's a great question. So thank you for asking that. And yes, I feel really aligned. More than purpose, it's like a mission and a soul calling.
Mm-hmm.
And what I feel that is for me is that I support others in recognizing and remembering the divine within themselves. And it's really just coming back into contact with that, because everyone
Mm-hmm.
is connected spiritually. And I mean that in a non-religious way. I mean, just energetically. And you're more than a physical body. You're more than flesh
Mm-hmm.
and bones, you know?
Yeah.
And depending on what you believe, right? I mean, there's people that are more in like the science aspect, which is, if you go down to the root of it,
Mm-hmm.
it's all energy.
Right.
And then beyond energy, like it's vibration, and there's so much there that it doesn't have to mean a certain structure, because that's
Mm-hmm.
again falling into a certain structure so we don't have to go into that, but even to the core root, the divine within you, and everyone has that. And it's a matter of remembering and recognizing, well, what does that mean to you? What is your spiritual connection? For some people it's nature, for some
Mm-hmm.
people it's connecting to their guides or their heart or their intuition. And so there's no right or wrong way.
Interesting. I like that. I'm curious. I'm glad you brought up religion, because immediately when you were describing your story and what you do, you said spirituality, and that can mean so
Hmm.
many different things to
Yeah.
so many different people. I'm curious if and how religion does factor in, and if that affects like what clients you have or choose. Like, would
Hmm.
someone who's Catholic not be a good choice for you because you just said, that things aren't religious based per se, or how does that factor in?
Absolutely. So, okay, I grew up Catholic and I don't consider myself Catholic anymore. And, or I don't consider myself religious at
Okay.
all. It's a spiritual connection. But my clients, like I've had clients who are Catholic, I've had clients who are Christian, I've had like a client that I love very much. She's a pastor. Like there are so many different kinds of clients. And then I have clients who don't believe that, but they do believe in their divinity, their energetics, like their own connection to their own light. And everyone can call it whatever they want, as long as they're okay with you know that I like as their spiritual mentor or spiritual guide or life coach or spiritual architect, whatever they want to call me and whatever sounds good to them,
Yeah.
that's fine. It's a matter of this connection, actually them getting to design their life through that. So for example, let's see. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So I'm open to everybody that feels that connection. And of course, if it's a back and forth connection. And uh, it's because I feel like I can speak into their language because I've been there. So I don't ever want to shift anyone's belief. It's more about them aligning to what's true to them. And if they find it through a religion, that's fine.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm curious. I feel like a lot of people are very disconnected from their light within. I think there are a
Mm.
lot of outside influences that make it hard for us to really feel great about ourselves. I'm wondering if you have any just general tips for people on how to kind of rekindle that or rediscover their light within.
Yes, absolutely. So a huge one is, okay, there's a couple that just popped up as you were saying that.
Sure.
The first one is slow down.
Okay.
It's like slow down your steps in between, like slow down from when something triggers you or something bothers you or something excites you, like whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, slow down your responses to really like just be with that, like
Mm-hmm.
feel true, like truly feel what's coming up in your body and like what's showing up for you and connect to that. And then the other one that came up is gratitude, like
Mm-hmm.
starting to feel grateful for what you have and what is around you and see the abundance around you. There's
Yeah.
so much scarcity mentality ingrained in like culturally and and beyond culturally too, but it's so important to start saying, look, what is around you and what's truly nourishing you and how can you be more grateful for what you have already. So those are two really big things that will like automatically start raising your vibration, because the vibration of gratitude is quite a high vibration. So
Yeah.
something I always encourage people is having those 5 bullet points of what you're grateful for each day in the morning, and then closing that at night. So you have this grateful sandwich of sorts. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think bookending your day with
Bookending.
gratitude,
Yeah.
yeah, is definitely, or a sandwich, it's pretty close to lunchtime. I'm always down. But yeah, it definitely like makes the in between part, the meat or cheese or whatever you put on your sandwiches, I guess vegetables, are I think easier to manage when you have that beginning and ending. I totally agree with that. So I'm going to go from something positive to something that may be negative. I guess it depends on your answer. But I always like to ask people the scariest moment they've gone through or the scariest experience
Ooh.
they've had, just because part of the podcast is to hopefully inspire people to like take risks. And so hearing
Yeah.
the different things other people have gone through and done, I think can be inspiring. So I'd love to hear yours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay. Um, there's a few things that come up, but for the purpose of, wow, okay, for the purpose of like our audience, like keeping them in
Sure.
mind, like it, like instead of like frightful, I'm feeling more like, okay, what was scary and courageous, and I went for it anyway. I feel like
Yeah.
that would be more supportive. Um, and then there's something else, like, okay, the first one that comes up is when I left architecture. Like that was a
Sure.
huge move for me.
Yeah.
But shortly before that, I left a long-term relationship.
Okay.
And that was also huge because it was when I truly chose me. I
Mm-hmm.
chose um, like the direction and the path that I wanted to go on. And and like really ending a relationship, not out of lack of love. It was more like not the same path anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So like ending something like that was really intense. And then that gave me like fuel and self-love to be able to say, okay, also my career and also this. So that
Yeah.
was a huge step for me to be like, okay, why, if I'm not going to stand, like if I'm not going to settle, like basically for this, then why would I settle for this or this or this and anything, right?
Sure.
So that was a huge one. Um, and
Kind of
then
set the
another one,
standard.
right, and in a way. And then I left architecture. And then the other piece that happened was like all of last year was a huge like detox year for me.
Okay.
I sold a lot of my things. I was living in LA. I sold
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my things, and I've been traveling all of this year, just intuitively traveling, supporting my heart. And really, the idea behind that was breaking down the structure of my life that was comfortable and going to the edges and
Yeah.
seeing, okay, like creating and being in new environments that were not comfortable. I started in India. I didn't know the culture very well. I don't know the language. There was a lot of unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
So really facing the unknown with courage and with the faith that you get to create your experience, and you get to really tune into your heart and you get to flow. Like that was huge, allowing myself to flow in these different countries. So I went to India, then Thailand and Bali and a few others. And I'm still in this process of traveling and still growing my business and creating retreats around the world. Like there's so many things happening and opening up, but it requires this different kind of flow. So
Mm-hmm.
like a flexible structure versus something more rigid, which is the way that I had my life before.
Okay.
So that was a huge thing for me.
I
That did
believe
take
it.
courage.
Yeah.
And even though externally it looks more like, oh, how fun, it's a lot.
I'm sure it is. Where are you right now?
Right now I'm in Texas. I'm visiting family for the
Okay.
holidays.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, I have been following you on Instagram for a while, of course, and seeing your travels, and they just look beautiful. I mean, of course, you show
Yeah.
the best parts, but
Yes.
I'm like, not to
It's
discount
fun.
how hard it is why I say that. But that's so amazing. I really appreciate you sharing all that. I have to say that I loved the wording of you saying when you left that relationship that you chose yourself, because it always
Mm.
fascinates me when people leave either jobs that they love or are happy with because it's not serving them the way it wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be, or, a relationship that, could be great, but it just isn't lighting you on fire anymore or heading where you
Yeah.
want it to. So I think that's even more courageous than leaving a job that you hate or a terrible partner.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious a little bit more about leaving architecture because
Mm-hmm.
I identified a little bit in the fact that I left a job that I had a degree for. I'm
Yeah.
wondering how that impacted your identity, even though you were going after something that you loved, you're doing something that you had advanced degrees for before, and then now you're like, oh no, I'm not going to use those anymore. Or
Yeah.
when people ask you what you do, maybe it's a little bit more work to explain soul architect versus civil architect.
Right. Absolutely. So, um, okay. So the moment, like, would you like to hear more like the moment of when I left, kind of?
Whatever you feel
Okay.
called.
So, yeah, and the transition started. So basically, where I left off last time, like in the beginning of this conversation, um, where I mentioned, I switched or I
Mm-hmm.
left. Um, a few months before that is when I started creating my business. So there was some time of overlap, maybe 6 months or so.
Okay.
And around month 3, because it's online, my business is online.
Yeah.
So I was nervous that all of my architecture community would know that I'm doing something that's not architecture,
Mm-hmm.
because um, I don't know. I didn't know if that was even allowed, or
And you
um,
don't want them to think you're not dedicated to your
you're
job
right,
or,
like
yeah.
right. So I was just like, ooh, this feels kind of funny. What do I do? Like, I don't want to hide it, because
Mm-hmm.
that's not real.
Yeah.
So I basically thought, okay, well, the scariest thing would be if my boss, this star architect or famous architect, would find out that
Yeah.
here I am out in the online world creating something different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, and then he had to find out that way. Like, that would be horrible.
Yeah.
So I basically said, okay, then that means I get to talk to him, because if he knows, then it doesn't matter who else knows.
Sure.
Like, so I made an appointment, and I like walked up to his office like a couple of weeks later when he was available.
Mm-hmm.
And I just I got there and I sat down and I was just like, okay, blah, blah, blah. It was just like I basically just told him, my heart is somewhere else, and I'm very good. I'm a very good architect, and I like a physical architect and spirit. So like I was able to get that job. Like I was doing great there,
Yeah.
but it just wasn't in my heart anymore. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
illuminating my heart. So I told him that, and he could see the passion for what I'm doing now in my eyes. And as a very passionate man himself, like he could see that.
Yeah.
And I was nervous that he would say, okay, we'll leave, because
Yeah.
I wanted a few more months in the job. I wanted it to be on my time, obviously.
Sure.
But I was still like a great employee and everything. But I just told him, look, I just want you to know this. I'm not giving you my resignation right now. It's just like, yeah, like I'm just letting you know where my heart is, basically, so
Yeah.
that I could feel free to just be me and go all in and 100% committed in my business online and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And um he was so kind. He was
Yeah.
so kind and supportive. He didn't really understand the structure of my online world, but he just knew and could see in my eyes, oh, okay, like he could recognize that sparkle,
Yeah.
and he honored it, and he said, you know what, like, I get it. Like, it's not about me switching you into a different job or a different project. It's like, you get to follow this, basically. And I'm really grateful to him for that, because that really freed me into um, just being like, okay, like free road, or open, like, go for it,
Sure.
So I did. And then 3 months later is when I think it was about 3 months later when I left the architecture job and just completely shifted into online.
That's awesome. Is it a name that I would maybe recognize, this lovely former boss of yours?
Maybe it was with Frank Gehry.
That does sound familiar, but I don't
Are you
know
in
where.
LA?
I was, yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you know the Walt Disney Concert Hall?
Yeah.
Okay, he did that,
Oh my
for
gosh,
example.
amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So all of his architecture is really amazing.
That's cool. Very cool. Well, I'm so glad. I always like to hear when people whose work, whatever it is that I admire, are nice. Like when you hear someone meets a
Oh,
celebrity and they're a
such a good
jerk
man.
and it
Yeah.
ruins everything. I'm glad to know that when I look at the concert hall, I can think of him being compassionate and passionate and
He's
awesome. So
he's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
awesome.
So
I'm glad
kind.
to hear that. Well, that sounds like a scary moment too, just
Mm-hmm.
bearing your heart. And you're right. He could have been like, oh, you don't care about this anymore. Bye. Good luck.
Right.
So I'm glad that that went well. And it's amazing that you were
Thanks.
able to have the courage to follow your heart and do that. I'm wondering what tips you have for people in those scary situations where they're pushing past fear, how you
Mm-hmm.
best recommend doing it since you've done it so many
Mm-hmm.
times.
Yes. And first of all, it gets more comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of starts being fun, like, okay, I'm going to push through this edge now. And what I remember doing exactly, like, as I was walking towards this appointment with him, that I was really scared, because this
I'm
for me
sure.
was a big moment of like, this is like me closing part of this chapter.
Yeah.
Um, to a certain extent, at least in this way. Um, because yeah. So anyways, there, um, in each step going up to his office, because his office was up like on a balcony, and
Hmm.
so yeah, so I was going up, and then each step I was just breathing, and I was just like, okay, thinking of like all of the moments of courage in my life that
Hmm.
have really set me up for, like, okay, like you got to do this, and then you did this, and like, the relationship piece was big. It was like, okay, like that happened, so now it's this. And then, I thought of other things, like I used to, dance ballet
Yeah.
in high school. So like being on stage like that, and then also speaking my truth whenever I've gotten to speak my truth, and I've been scared to in certain moments, because sometimes it's uncomfortable or
Sure.
vulnerable or whatever, and just like knowing, okay, this just gets me closer to me, and this is my truth, and it really is liberating to just express that. And yeah, so just remembering those moments gave me so much strength each step of the way. And then also, being connected to other people that knew that I was doing that day, and telling them like, okay, like I'm going for
Here
it,
we
like
go.
sharing vulnerably, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm doing this. And like having people also hold that space for me was really supportive. And sometimes that's something that, um, I know in other times of my life I didn't do. I didn't share it. It was like, okay, I'll just share the outcome. But
Yeah.
sharing that step of, okay, like they saw me prepare for it. They saw all of these things, and they were really holding space and rooting for me in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of support was amazing in those moments. So just remembering to share with people that love you and can really hold that just, ground for you,
Yeah.
is really powerful. And being vulnerable and being like, okay, well, here it goes, you know?
Yeah, I think that that's such great advice, both the kind of evidence file that you mentally went through of
Yeah.
different times that you were terrified and survived, and
Hmm.
then being vulnerable and having a good support system, which is how you get a good support system, by being
Yes.
vulnerable for sure. So that's such great tips. I really appreciate it. Now, if somebody is listening, and I know I've alluded to your beautiful Instagram pictures from your travels, and I
Oh.
also love your affirmations that you have in English and in Spanish on your stories, are really nice to have. If people are
Hmm.
looking for an architect in their lives, where can they find you online?
Yeah, I'd love that. So definitely on Instagram is probably the best place. And it's at soulshape.me. So
Hmm.
at soulshape.me.
Hmm.
And, so that's the best place. Or they can also email, Ana, ANA,
Hmm.
at soulshape.me.
Okay.
But Instagram would be the best, and you guys could just DM me and I'll support you with whatever you need.
Okay, awesome. That's
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Let's see, I had a question and it just completely vanished. Oh, SoulShape. I wanted to ask what the inspiration was for that name.
Yes, of course. So, okay, so SoulShape comes from, well, first of all, the way that I see it and feel it is, the soul has no shape. Your soul has no shape. It just doesn't. But the thing is that it's a constantly morphing energy in a sense, right?
Okay.
So if you could imagine it like a particle cloud that's constantly shifting colors and vibration and frequency, and like it's this beautiful dancing cloud, let's say, if you had
Okay.
to make it physical. And that's what I love, that we get to explore all of these different facets of you in your multidimensional body, which means like your physical, your emotional, your spiritual, your mental, like all of these different aspects of you get to be seen, they get to be explored, and get to be freed in certain ways, because some have structures that are not supporting, some have very wobbly structures. So what I support with is looking, okay, let's see what's not structured at all, what's wobbly, what's not supporting that vision, because sometimes you have this big dream and this big vision, but the structure that it's standing on is like a total wobbly mess. So it's really hard for you to like achieve something or get to something or create or manifest something with a wobbly structure, because it would just doesn't have the capacity to hold it.
Yeah.
So that's why personal development and mindset and all of this kind of inner work is really, really important.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the imagining the dancing particle cloud changing colors. It sounds really stunning. I think I'm going to try to just think about that every day.
Yes. I mean, that's your magic,
Yeah, that's beautiful. You mentioned personal development, and I'm going to ask you for some book recommendations. They don't have to be in personal development. It can be, a trashy romance novel that you read on the beach somewhere, but anything that you think our listeners and viewers would like to read, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. So if you're starting your journey, the ones I like to recommend the most would be like these are kind of classics, like The Four Agreements. If it's more about love and relationship and relating, I love The Mastery of Love. They're both of the same author, Don Miguel Ruiz. And another one that I know has been super supportive for people is Untethered Soul. A Return to Love.
Okay.
That's good. Those are a lot, but those are some of my favorites that start setting a good foundation for questioning and inquiring, and they're great. And
That's
if anyone
awesome.
has more specific questions, you can just send me a DM and I can maybe give you a more specific book.
Okay, that's awesome. And thank you for being generous with your time to interact with people if they want to. Now, though, I feel like you've automatically just organically in our conversation given such great advice, and through your experiences, and of course, as a, soul architect, you, I'm sure, have a lot of advice that you give clients and stuff, but I want to make sure if there's any lessons that you want to share or anything that's just kind of on your heart that you feel called to share with our listeners or viewers, that you have the moment now to let us know anything else that could be helpful.
Thank you. As you were sharing that, what came up for me was just the reminder of coming into your heart, like coming back into the heart, because so much of every day is here, because that's what we're trained to do, like being in the mind and being in the intellect and being in that space versus in the heart space. And the reason why it's so important and having heart-brain coherence which is like the link of the brain and the heart, is the heart is like a portal that expands you into a different way of being. And when you are in your heart, the way that you relate to others, the way that you connect to people you love, to people you don't know, to people, everybody, it
Yeah.
becomes this different experience. And you can tell very clearly when someone's speaking from their heart space versus from their mind. And it's a really powerful practice to just remember to come back into the heart. So that's what I'd love to invite people to do more and more, especially as we go into 2020. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think that's incredible because I always ask my guests, I haven't had the chance to share this with you, but you may have seen it before on my Instagram, but I always ask my guests to come up with a challenge for the listeners and viewers. And so hold your thought and figure out what it is. But I had a guest who challenged you to look at the world through love goggles, was how she
I love that.
phrased it.
Yeah.
And when I did it, I was just walking around and, I would even just see strangers on the street and think like, oh, like just kind of sending loving thoughts to them. And it was one of the most beautiful days. Like everything else about it was just pretty standard. I went to the gym, ran errands, but I would just like see people on the street and be like, oh, how nice. And it was just a really beautiful experience. So when you said that, I'm like, that would be a great practice to incorporate all the time just because that whole day was so amazing. So I'm so glad that you shared that advice.
Yes, of course. So I guess that's a similar challenge, to come into the heart and but it'd be good to have like a catch maybe. Well, no, I mean, maybe similar to what you were sharing, like you see someone new in the street and then you notice, okay, am I in my head or am I in my heart? And when you're in your head, you're thinking like,
Sure.
You're processing things. But when you're in your heart, you're like radiating,
Yeah.
Nice.
I like that. All right. So I have my last question for you, and it's one of my favorites. I even asked it before the podcast came to be, but I think it's really fun. So I would like to challenge you to think back to when you were 8. And if 8-year-old Ana Paula had a crystal ball and could see the architecture, the dream job, the scary moments, the relationship, the traveling, you're home now in Texas or visiting family in Texas, and then you probably have something planned for 2020. So the foreseeable future, God willing. I'm curious, on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little Ana Paula be for now?
Wow, she'd be super excited, like 12.
I love it.
Yeah.
I had a feeling that you were going to have a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for what you do on Instagram. Like that's my biggest exposure to you, and it's always warm and beautiful and lovely. So I appreciate that. And then I'm sure your clients have even more of an impact from you. So thank you for what you're doing in the world and for sharing your story. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Mandy. I really appreciate you too. Thank you for creating this space and this platform for people to go deeper through these conversations. And that's really powerful. And I know how passionate you are, and I love that. So it's really beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
I hope that you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. I absolutely love following Ana Paula on social media. I think I mentioned in our interview that she does these great things in her Instagram stories that are affirmations, and her voice is so calming and it's just such a nice presence. So if you don't already, I suggest you go follow her. You can, of course, find her links as well as the show notes that have book recommendation links and all of that in the show notes at boldmovespodcast.com. If you haven't been, I suggest you go there and check it out. I would love it if you shared this episode with anyone who you think would find it valuable. I would love it if you subscribed so that you don't miss any episodes, including a challenge coming from Ana Paula this Friday. And I would, of course, love it if you would leave nice reviews in Apple Podcasts. My goal is that these stories will inspire people and that
people will hear themselves in the stories and think, well, if Ana Paula can do it, I can do it too. But nobody's going to hear them unless you help me spread the word, or at least just the same people will hear them over and over. So that is where your help comes in, and I would really, really appreciate you helping me on that mission, because you're also helping the people who you share this with, hopefully. All right, thank you so much for listening, and as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.